Welcome to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the meaning and the power of the most important story in business. The one that answers why someone should buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. This is the story that defines the very character and nature of an organization. At WordWrite, we call it your capital S story. In each episode, we feature guests who have great insights on business storytelling, who can share their experience and key learnings to help you and your business do a better job of sharing your capital S story to deliver remarkable business results. Today, we're honored to have my friend Mary Maloney as a guest. She's the CEO. She's been a CEO and a chief marketing officer. She's led repositioning, messaging, and branding initiatives on the client and the agency side for global and iconic brands, including Mercy Health System, Penn Medicine, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Intuit, Centene, the Center for Creative Leadership. I'm telling you, Mary, those are just really small organizations I've never heard of. Mary sold her first business, a medical marketing firm, at age 32. Today, she's the principal for Revealing Genius LLC, where she works with accomplished leaders in healthcare and in the medical community. So think C-suite executives, founders, physicians, using her trademarked Excavate, Tell, Affirm process to powerfully message their expertise and their personal why so that they can lead with conviction and rapidly fulfill their most coveted career goals. Revealing Genius partners with healthcare companies to provide executive outplacement and with distributors to share her online course with healthcare leaders around the globe. And if you're looking for educational credentials, well, Mary's got them. Duquesne University, Villanova University, and the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Folks, please welcome our guest, Mary Maloney. Hey, Mary.
Hey, Paul, great to see you. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so excited to be a guest on your podcast. I do have a little fun fact. I have a big shout out to you. When you were a guest on my podcast, The Great Work of Your Life, the interview series, it jumped to one of the top 3 most engaged of all of the episodes. So bravo, and thank you for that.
Well, thanks for sharing that fun fact too. The check is in the mail. I'll make sure that we keep that at the top there. Tell our audience a little bit more about the podcast. What kind of guests do you have? Where can it be found?
Yes, The Great Work of Your Life is the name of the podcast. It can be found online at our URL, which is www.revealinggenius.com. And the guests we have on our show are folks very much like you who have figured out what it is that lights them up. And they're doing that. They're doing very fulfilling work. Some like you, Paul, have figured it out early. Some have figured it out sort of in the autumn of their careers. And what I do is I ask folks the same 14 questions plus a bonus question. But what makes the podcast really interesting is the answers are just so very different. And it's really all about inspiring folks to pursue what they love to do, the great work of their life.
That's great. Folks, we'll put all that information in the show notes so you can check it out. I can tell you from personal experience, it was a lot of fun to be on the podcast. I love your approach, Mary. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
Did I miss anything in your bio that you think should be called out for our audience?
Oh my gosh, no, well done. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for sharing that background. You've really been around the block in a very positive way, I must say. One of the things we always do in an episode of Storylines Live is ask our guests about the capital S story. And we like to find out which of those 4 elements I described in the introduction is most relevant to them where they are in their journey today. Buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. What's working for you these days, or what's most important there?
Thank you, Paul. And I listened to quite a few of your podcasts before I came on, so I'm prepared for this question. And I would say of the of all the fundamentals, the capital S fundamentals, the one right now that's most important is partner. Because the only way that we, in terms of what we do, can reach a global audience, it's really through partnerships. And I think, and we've talked about this offline, is that now more than ever, we as leaders, accomplished leaders who have, using your words, have been around the block for a while, we
Mm.
need to take control of our brand narratives.
Yes.
And even in your book, I'll give, a shameless plug for your book, Finding Your Capital S Story. Subtitle is Why Your Story Drives Your Brand. In
Right.
your book, you talk a lot about um, we live in a less than 7-second world
Yeah, we do.
where first impressions matter. We have to capture the hearts and minds of our stakeholders almost immediately within, just a couple of blinks or listens. Um, and many leaders haven't been formally trained in the art and science of personal branding. So you and I can help with that. You can help with companies. I can help with executive personal brands.
Yeah.
And with social media being so ubiquitous, I mean, I really feel so strongly that it's not just advantageous
Mhm.
to really drill down on your capital S story, but it's imperative.
Well, that's great. That's a fantastic answer. Now, obviously, the capital S story, as you know, Mary, that's our definition, our term of art. It's part of our process storycraft, and we use with our clients. One of the reasons why I'm so pleased to have you in this episode is because of your story. So, what's your definition of story? How do you use story in your own business?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, I would say that I would say this, Paul. I would say that um, in terms of capital S story, um, if I may share my own, if
Yes,
that's okay.
please. Yes.
Yes. So, and it takes place in Pittsburgh. So, and I know you're in Pittsburgh, you're based in Pittsburgh. So I
And
would say the headline for my capital S story is Amazing Kids Thrive Here.
hmm,
And it's a story about how I got hooked on branding in my first job out of college. Lucky me. I was hired to help with a rebrand in Pittsburgh for a company called the Rehabilitation Institute. It was
well,
changing its name to the Children's Institute, and it was to better reflect their core competency. And that was caring for children with severe cognitive and physical disabilities.
right.
We hired an outside agency and we partnered with them. We came up with a tagline called Amazing Kids. And
Mhm.
we launched the rebrand with this major multimedia blitz: TV, radio, billboards, print, digital. It was an omni-channel approach. And we used the same key messages across all of those modalities. And what I learned was that messaging mattered. And as a result, we put this hidden gem. It was a small regional player at the time, but we put this company on the international map in less than 1 year. And I tell you, Paul, it was so exciting to be part of that aligned culture because before we went to market, we went through a very rigorous internal branding exercise, which I really think was key to our success.
Mm.
I loved going to work. I was really proud to be part of that transformation. It was a reinvention. Employees were jazzed. Um, and so, fast forward to present day, the Amazing Kids message was so successful that we actually changed the URL to amazingkids.com.
No kidding.
And it has sustained to this day. So you can go online right now, type in amazingkids.com. This is 30 years later and it's still there. Um,
Wow.
and yeah, and that story, it still informs what I do on a daily basis. It's because honestly, it's because of that experience, Paul, that I got hooked on the power of brand building.
Hmm.
And it really was about getting the message right, getting the story right above all else, like having it resonate on an emotional level. And what I learned from that was messaging matters.
Yeah.
So I just decided that I wanted to forever be in the branding business. And I also decided I wanted to love my work. and culture that I was in. So
Mm,
I'm still just effusive about branding today,
yes.
um, as I was then. So I feel very lucky, very thankful, very blessed for that.
As I shared in the introduction with your bio, you've had a wide variety of experiences that have led you to where you are today. Um, I'm frequently asked, Mary, when I speak on this topic, especially by leaders, CEOs, what is the difference between the branding for a leader and the branding of an organization, the story for a leader and the story for an organization? Could you share your thoughts with our audience on that?
Yeah, I think they're very similar. Um, I and it really comes down to the definition of brand.
Right.
And so, and we can arm wrestle on the definition of brand. But in terms of executive personal branding, which is what the area that I dwell in now, I define brand, and you'll love this, as the manifestation of the human spirit.
Mm, I love
And
that.
credit where credit is due. Um, Debbie Millman has a wonderful TED Talk about the history of brand. And she talks at length about this concept.
Mhm.
And she takes us on a tour of history where she proves without a shadow of a doubt that marketing technology will come and go. AI is a great example of that right now.
Mm,
Um, but branding process has been around literally since the beginning of time.
yes.
And and great brands, whether it's an iconic brand, whether it's a company or
Mhm.
whether it's an individual, it, we have to create an emotive response vis-a-vis the competition. So so I would say that brand is it's the emotive response that's elicited when you think about either your individual brand amongst a competitive set, or if you think about your company amongst a competitive set.
Mhm.
And I think you would argue, Paul, that the story is the only thing that the competition can't duplicate.
Absolutely. Yeah. We frequently say that your story is your most valuable marketing asset. It's the only thing you own that nobody else does. And if you think your story and a competitor's story are the same, it's worth spending a little bit more time to dig into that because I guarantee you they are not the same. And when we do our work, one of the first places we see that is when we talk to an organization's employees and clients or customers. They're crystal clear on what the difference is. People who've been with an organization for a long period of time, whether it's as employees or as customers, big part of the reason why they're there, sometimes the main reason they're there, is that story, right? Um, in your work, Mary, and I'm curious because I get this related question a lot, kind of a follow-up to the last question. Leaders will ask me, does my brand, does my story have to be the same as my organization's brand or story? I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer that I would give is no, necessarily. And it really depends on the organization too. When I talk with corporate leaders who run large companies, I remind them that the about page on the website is one of the most visited pages on any website.
Mhm.
So the company may have an established brand and key messages about the organization, but I can almost guarantee you that that about page is getting looks. Folks want to know who the leaders are. Folks want to know what you stand for. Folks want to know what you're all about. And it's prime real estate. And I really think that there's a lot of leaders out there who are missing the opportunity to share their extraordinary why, to talk about causes that they're passionate about, things that really do set them apart from the competition. And when there's a talent war and you have top talent that's checking out, again, vis-a-vis the competition, they're going to look at the leadership and ask, do I align with the core values of the leaders? That's really, really important. So I can see where the individual story could be a little bit different from the company story, but the core values intersect.
Right. There needs to be some level. alignment, right? They need to connect in a way, right? Yeah, absolutely. I know frequently when I speak, I'll do a review, depending upon the audience of the company I'm speaking to, or the companies, the leaders in the room that I'm speaking to. And that's, people hit your homepage. They're only going to stick there for 3 seconds. If they like what they see, they're going to that about page. The next place they're going to go is to the leader biographies. And frequently that means going to LinkedIn and looking to see whether the LinkedIn profile of the leadership has messaging that's consistent with the organization. If all they see is a resume, or if they see that the LinkedIn bio hasn't been updated, that is a synaptic disconnect that's going to diminish the credibility of the organization and the leader, because it says to whoever's looking at the site, prospective employee, prospective partner, customer, boy, this leader just doesn't care that much about connecting who they are, their extraordinary why, as you put it, with the organization that they're leading.
Indeed, absolutely. Yes. I have a great example of a gentleman who came to me, highly accomplished individual, Paul. He was the president of Procter and Gamble, Latin America, spoke 7 languages, traveled the world, had unbelievable bona fides, just mind blowing. And he retired early and applied for a coveted board seat,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't get it. And when he came to me, he was really upset about that. And when he got feedback from the board chair, who was a friend of his, the board chair said that his he wasn't able to articulate his purpose in a way that it aligned with the company's values. He said the person they gave the role to was able to do that very convincingly. He said, you need to figure out what your purpose is. He said, you need to be more on brand so that it's convincing. So when he came to me, what I helped him do was create a brand manifesto. And he was a little skeptical when we first started, but when we were done, oh my gosh, he connected the dots, and he realized that he had so much more to give. He had so many stories and so many key messages to share that were lying dormant for a long time.
Wow, that is a great example. Mary, you've shared a couple of things that I really want to dig into, the extraordinary why of leaders and also the brand manifesto. And we're going to do that in just a moment after this message. Thanks for listening, folks, to the Storylines Live podcast, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks, to Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and the meaning of the most important story in business, the capital S story, the one that answers why someone would buy from you, work for you, invest in you, or partner with you. We're pleased today on this episode to have as our guest Mary Maloney, the principal of Revealing Genius, a branding and storytelling expert whose specialty is working with leaders to help them better identify and share their story, their brand. Mary, before the break, we were talking about how you work with your clients. And you talked about a couple of terms I'd love for you to dig into: helping leaders identify their extraordinary why and creating for them a brand manifesto. Share with our audience what you mean by those two terms.
Sure. Yeah. I would say, Paul, that my most popular requests for service
Right.
is what we call the brand manifesto. It's a
Okay.
very simple 1-page overview where we co-create with a leader on 2 calls. And it includes 3 things. One is your 2-word purpose, which is why we exist to serve. Second is the extraordinary why statement, where together we we capture at what we are the best in the world.
Yeah.
how we have impact when we're fully present and in flow. And then the third is hows. And these are non-negotiable. So in their absence, we can't fulfill our extraordinary why.
Hmm.
And pulled a couple of quotes. I had a feeling you're going to ask about that because that
Yeah.
is our
Yeah.
signature
Yeah.
service. Um, and I think the quotes really describe it best. Like here's a few. Like
Great.
recently, this is just from last week. Um, I had one woman say, I am excited for the first time in months about my future.
Hmm.
It is as if you awaken people from their slumber.
Oh, wow.
Today's brand manifesto went places that completely surprised me. And my why is exactly my why. And it has been for decades. And I did not consciously know it. And then this one I really like is thank you so much for putting fuel back into my tank. So I would say the manifesto is a really good place to
Hmm.
start. It's like a true north guide. It's just an excellent way to get a brand narrative going. It's very authentic, and very different from the competition.
I love that. That is just awesome. Now, Mary, that is so great, the work that you do with leaders. But I have to ask, is folks who are listening at the beginning will recall from me sharing your bio, you didn't start out as a personal branding expert. What was the tipping point that got you to shift gears and look at leaders versus the organizations they lead?
Yeah, I'd have to say, Paul, there was really two. There were 2 points in time, and uh, I harken back to 2007, 2008, 2009, the recession. We remember that, and
Yeah.
at the time, C-suite execs were losing their jobs
Yes.
unexpectedly. Many had no safety net. It was truly a buyer's market. There were too few chief positions and too many, quite frankly, too many highly qualified applicants. The
Right.
competition was was fierce.
Hmm.
And I started to get these confidential calls. Folks would call or email me and say, "Can I talk with you confidentially?" And when we got on the phone, they asked, could I help them with personal brands? They knew that I did a lot of work with company brands, was very passionate about, especially in the healthcare space. Um, so I did. And long story short, I ended up doing so many that I had to build a replicable process to keep up with the demand. So that that was kind of this tipping point, the starting point, if you will, where
Yes.
I actually built my trademark process. I call it Excavate Tell a Firm.
Yes.
And I had a ton of encouragement to pursue it as a business. It
Hmm.
was the most fulfilling work I had ever done. I didn't do it at the time. Um, but in 2018, I finally did. And I have to my mentor to thank. He actually purchased the URL revealinggenius.com for me as a gift.
That is
And
great.
he basically grabbed me by, the shirt collar and he said,
Mhm.
Mary, you need to do this. You need to do this. Um, and then the second tipping point was COVID. When
Oh,
COVID hit, there I don't know if you experienced this, Paul, but there was this reckoning. Like there's a record number of CEOs leaving their posts.
yes.
There's
Yeah.
the quiet quitting phenomenon. Folks really started to reevaluate, what really matters, especially accomplished seasoned leaders. Um, so who knew? Who knew that there would be such a demand for executive personal branding and for branding on purpose? And that's one of the hashtags that we rank on is hashtag brand on purpose. So I would say there were two tipping points. Um, so lucky me.
Yeah, that is awesome. Okay, I have to follow up by asking this question. Obviously, you are passionate about what you do. So, what gives you the most satisfaction and enjoyment in working with folks?
I would say quite simply, it's living my own extraordinary why. And I do keep my own brand manifesto on my desk. I look at it every day. It's how I start every morning. And I'll share with you my extraordinary why. And this might make more sense. So
It's
my extraordinary why is this. It is to connect people to what lights them up so they have clarity, courage, and confidence
Mhm.
to share their brand genius. So when I'm actively engaged in doing that, it is it is like game over. And that's what I wish for everyone, honestly. Like I mean, it's the only game when you come right down to it, you know? Um, there's this wonderful quote that I love to use by Howard Thurman.
Hmm.
And it goes like this. He says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask instead what makes you come alive and go do it.
Wow.
Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. So that's that gives me the most fulfillment is when I see folks light up.
Man, I love that, Mary. That is a great quote and a great philosophy that really fits with what you do. I can't believe this conversation has just flown by. I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you if there were topics or points that you wanted to make that we haven't covered yet.
Yeah, I would say there's two. One is in terms of storytelling, the greatest marketers in the world know one thing. They know their audience. I call it beloved avatar. And I would say, I mean, to be a great raconteur, you really have to know who you're talking with, understand them at a very deep level, psychographically, their fears, their frustrations, what motivates them. Understand that, and you'll really be able to tell a compelling story. And
Mhm.
then the part two, and you and I have talked about this, Paul,
Mhm.
is storytelling is really an art and science.
Yes.
And I admit that openly that I'm obsessed with Journal of Neuroscience. They have
Yeah,
fascinating articles
they do.
where cognitive neuroscientists they study the neural mechanisms um, underlying human communication. They um, Paul Zach has a really neat
Yes, he's great.
video on YouTube about how storytelling is actually good for you. It releases oxytocin.
Oxycontin. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and uh, I I can't get enough of it. So it has been proven, like research has shown that in terms of the neuroscience of storytelling, um, it told a story told well um, not only helps you to connect more authentically with your audience, but it's actually good for your brain.
It is. Absolutely. There's a biological imperative to share stories. I often say, Mary, that I wasn't there. I'm not that old, but I'm confident that when the first person in the world figured out how to make fire on purpose, they shared that in a story to explain to the next person how to do it. You know what I mean? That's where it starts at the very beginning of civilization, pre-written word, et cetera, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it all comes down to story and you are a master at the story, Paul. We go way back. I mean, you've been telling
We
stories
do.
for a long time. And what I remember from uh, our interview was you figured out early too that storytelling was really what you wanted to do.
Yeah, if you spend too many years in journalism and you write too many stories, which I probably did, tens of thousands, really, folks, I counted it one time. It's a sad exercise in some ways. But hey, if you're going to say you're an expert, you may as well be able to prove it, and that's my proof. But that's a lot of beginnings, middles, and ends. And to your point, Mary, that's you really learn what moves people's hearts and minds and inspires them to act, and that's how I came by that legitimately. So I appreciate you mentioning that. Mary, how can folks find you?
The best place is online. Website is revealinggenius.com or of course LinkedIn. I will say I do go by Mary E. Mary Maloney is a very common name in Ireland, as you can imagine. I'm one of six children. I have five siblings, three sisters, and they're all named Mary. So
Really?
just about every woman in my family is named Mary something. So
Mhm.
I'm Mary E. So I go by Mary E. Maloney on LinkedIn.
Now you have to tell the audience because people are going to wonder what does the E stand for?
The E stands for Elizabeth, and I have three sisters. So I have Mary Margaret, Mary Frances, and Mary Teresa.
Boy, that's great. You got
And here you'll love this, Paul. My brother, my baby brother, Patrick, married Mary Ellen, hand to God. Yes.
goodness.
And my brother Sean, his significant other, her name is Shannon O'Grady. And we started calling her Mary Shannon years ago, even though that's not her name. And now her own family calls her Mary Shannon. So she feels included.
I love that. What a great story, huh? Oh man, this life on earth can be a lot of fun, really. Mary, on behalf of our audience, I want to thank you for spending time today with us here on Storylines Live. Folks, everything we talked about today, all the links will be in the show notes. Thank you all for being here today for Storylines Live, the only podcast that explores the power and meaning of the most important story in business, your capital S story, the one that answers why someone would buy from you, work for you, or invest in you. Mary, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Paul. Great to be here.
Thanks. Folks, we'll see you next time on the next episode of Storylines Live.